And here I'm going to go ahead and make that meatloaf in a small meatloaf pan. And I tell you, the basics of this recipe are going to be, you know, one hamburger. I'm using this time Angus beef ground chuck because I got it on sale. You want 80% lean, 20% fat. If you have anything leaner than that, it'll just make it into a brick, and that's not something you want. Breadcrumbs are high carb, so you want to use old-fashioned oats instead. And of course, we're going to have onions and a stalk of celery, finely diced up, and also sweated, cooked, a little bit of butter until they're soft. Otherwise, raw onions or raw vegetables will make the loaf fall apart. So we don't do that. A couple eggs, large eggs in the meat mix. And also you want to have Worcestershire sauce, I can never say that, paprika. If you got roasted paprika, that's the best. But if you only have paprika, you can use paprika. And onion powder and garlic powder, as well as tomato paste. Now you can add a tablespoon of this to the meat and mixture with the oats and milk and all that and eggs, and it'll add it extra moisture. So I'm also going to add some, this is optional, I'm going to add some mushrooms finely diced up and cooked a little too with the onions and the celery to make them tender and not fall apart. Parmesan cheese is another thing you're going to want to have. Coming in the green can is just fine. So I'm going to go ahead and begin the process of mixing the meat together, and I'll do that first. And so I'm going to go ahead and put the 2 pounds of meat into a bowl. And it's nice, tender. Angus beef is a bonus, but it's not a magical thing. But it's perfectly fine to use Angus beef chuck. There you go with this. More beautiful meat. And I get it in there, it's already nice and ready for working on. The next thing I'm going to do is put the eggs in. 2 eggs. There we go. And first you want to knead in the egg. Knead that in nicely. Get the egg all over the place, as ingrained in it as possible before you begin anything else, because then you're going to run into oversaturation of one part, not the other. So you want to get that meat egged up. And then you're going to want to add the 1/2 cup of old-fashioned oats per 2 pounds. There we go, 1/2 cup. And then 1/4 cup of milk. You can use almond milk, but we didn't have almond milk much back in the 70s. So here we go with 1/4 cup. 1/4 cup. Put that in there. Blend that in well. Now, as I said, you could add a tablespoon of tomato paste, but actually, that's per pound of meat, so that's 2 tablespoons of that. So let's put that in there just to see how it goes. To go with, this is going to be a teaspoon. I'm going to make that much, and then again, that 3 should do it, and that leaves me half a can, give or take. Mix that in well too, very well. We want it to reach every part of the meat. So I'm going to keep doing it. You don't want any loose. You don't want it loose on the outside. So if you got it around the edges of your bowl, you want to get it off, mixed in with the meat. And you can just take your meat, rub your meat along the side. So what I'm going to do next is I'm going to dice up the yellow onion, one yellow onion, and my 1 stalk of celery, and my few mushrooms. Not the whole package, but it depends on your taste. You don't have to add the mushrooms. So I'm adding some mushrooms, maybe half a cup. I'm going to dice them up very, very fine. Now I'm going to use my food processor thing this time, because I don't want to sit here and chop. I want to do this because you want to have it fine. If it's too big, they're going to fall out. That meatloaf can fall apart when you're trying to cut it and all that other stuff. So I'm going to go ahead and do that now. This was pretty quick. And you see, after only a couple, it's chopped them up, but still needs work. After that little brief thing, that's what I have. Not too small, not too big. And it will go right in the mix perfectly. And next I'm going to sweat my vegetables after I put in the mushrooms. And I'm going to sweat them in a pan. This time I'm going to use my Japanese omelet pan. But I'm going to melt the butter about medium, just under, maybe 4. And then I could put these in and let them sweat once it heats up. You're going to back off on the total mix once you mix them all together. But if you put mushrooms in, you got to take away slightly from the onions and the celery, but mostly the onions. Then you have this extra that you can use for something else. But we'll sweat that, get that cooking a little bit, get it saturated and soft, and then we'll add it to the mix and we'll go from there. What you'll want to aim for is, if you're doing all these veggies at the same time, if you're doing them separately, do it a little bit different. But once you're done and you've sweated them, you're going to want to have 1 cup to 1/4 a cup of total vegetables. You add that to the mix. Like I said, if you add mushrooms, you need to reduce the other stuff to make it so it won't just fall apart. Too much in there. So 1 cup after you sweat it should be basic rule. And if your oven runs hot, you're going to use about a tablespoon of butter to do this. And I know you're going to use a regular pan. It's a little easier than this, believe me. But I already have the pan dirty. So about 8 to 10 minutes, stirring occasionally. And that should do it. Now I have it on 4. I can drop that down to 3 or 2. I don't want this burning. And if you want to add a little bit of olive oil, you can, to help the butter from not scorching. But I use olive oil butter with sea salt. So that. I also have olive oil butter with no salt, and I usually use that for cooking. But for this particular thing, I'm going to, because I'm going to be adding salt later, and pepper, which is a no-brainer. But so I won't have to add the salt. It's in the butter, and I can just add the pepper along with my other, paprika and all the other stuff. And now I'm going to go ahead with the meat, and I'm going to go ahead and add the 1/4 cup of Parmesan cheese, shredded or grated. And 1 cup. That's why I use a square pan. That knows exactly how much it holds. That goes in the mix. And now we're at the paprika and the other stuff. For it to be 1 tablespoon of Worcestershire, however the heck you say that, 1 tablespoon. And all the other ingredients. So I did that, and now I'm going to mix in all this stuff really good. And I told you I was going to use more of that tomato paste, but I decided not to. I would use it, and vinegar, and all the ingredients here to make the glaze, but I remembered all of a sudden I'm doing the diabetic friendly, so I'm going to use tomato ketchup, 0 sugar added, and then put a light glaze on the top before I bake it. Or you don't have to put a topping on at all and bake it without a glaze, and then add your glaze later. It depends on what you want to do. So you mix all that in very well. Yeah, I use gloves, and I'll tell you why I use gloves. I've mentioned this before. Because I'm in the middle of this, something happens. I'm a caregiver, I'm a family caregiver. I gotta go and deal with things. And I don't have time to be washing my hands, so I can just pull this off and not contaminate whatever I'm going into. So that's what another use of these medical grade gloves. So, our next step, now we're we're ready, basically, to put it in the bread pan. Now you can oil this very light, butter it very lightly, not much at all. Just grease it up a little bit, whatever. Put a little bit in there, rub it on the sides and the bottom. You don't want it sticking. To get out all the corners and all that. And when you're putting your meat in, just scoop it in and pat it down, pack it down, but don't press it hard. You don't want to compact it, you want it airy enough so that it can be sliced and not packed in. So make sure to get all the corners in too. And what we're going to be doing now is preheating our oven to 350. That the butter that I used has salt in it, but if not, you wanted to put in salt and pepper in that mix. But you can also put it on the outside. There's also some things like garlic and pepper seasoning. This is very strong, and I found this at Dollar Tree, but I'm not using it today. It didn't exist. back in 1975 and 1978 or 1980. So we're going to let the oven preheat. Then we're going to cover the pan with foil and let it begin. And then we're going to bake it covered for 45 minutes. And then we'll uncover it, make sure it's looking good, and then we'll lightly glaze the top with this. Lightly, not too much, not oversaturation. And then we'll cook that and see how that turns out. Once we got our internal temperature up, we know it's done. So we're getting ready to get our meatloaf out of the oven. The covered meatloaf has been in there for 45 minutes. And we're gonna bring it out, uncover it, and we're gonna put on the tomato ketchup. Now I recommend getting a good thick tomato ketchup, one you like. You don't need to use this zero sugar added or sugar free. I'm doing this because I want to make it somewhat diabetic friendly. And why did I use this rather than make the glaze myself? Because essentially the glaze that goes on a meatloaf back in 1970 and 80, whatever it was, tomato ketchup. And that looks pretty good. Not 100% perfect yet. See, it receded a little bit, which is good. But now we're going to put on the tomato ketchup. Then I'm gonna brush it on all over the top, every surface I can find. Some people like it a thick coat, some people like it a thin coat. I'm gonna do it a little bit both middle. Once we do that, more or less like this, we put it back in the oven for 15 minutes. And then we'll take a look at it. And now let's see what it is. Oh, look at that, nice. That's pretty good. Get out our meat thermometer, make sure it's 160. And sometimes you'll get it in the center and it won't be exactly 160, but it'll be over that on the edges. So, what do we do now? We let it sit out 15-20 minutes, and then we can slice it and serve it. And we'll do that later. And I've sliced it. I'm setting up my plate for my neighbor Marshall. Actually, 2 plates for my neighbor Marshall. And that's what it looks like. And of course, it's diabetic friendly. If I wanted to make it even more flavorful, I could add more things that wouldn't be diabetic friendly.
Well, I can't say it no more.
Say it again.
Well, you said an omelet. We're not doing it that way.
We're not doing it that way. She's not making an omelet for my dad.
Usually, this is Mark's ghetto way. 2 eggs, some creamer, some mayo, and some butter, and some stuff, and then you stick it in the microwave for 1:30 seconds.
And stop it every 30 seconds to mix it up.
That's the ghetto way.
Yes, and it's plastic. And don't give me this. I won't do it plastic stuff.